What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Underdog Podcast. Today we have my Week 4 Power Rankings, continuing the weekly series of breaking down every team, where I think they are at the current position in the league. And without further ado, let's get right into it, starting with our number 32 team. We are continuing with the New Orleans Saints. And, despite having a pretty good week last week, they just got absolutely destroyed this week at Seattle. A little pump fake, kind of like they did last year, except they're actually the worst team in the league this year. So, I think as far as the Saints in this kind of year one of the Kellen Moore tenure, it's more so about finding guys finding younger guys you can build your team around. Your older guys like Alvin Kamara, Cam Jordan, kind of moving them out the door, and then, finding these other guys. I think that really the only guy defensively that has really provided anything for them is Carl Granderson. He has definitely, been one of the more underrated pass rushers this season. Offensively for the Saints, they just couldn't really get the ball rolling this week against the Seattle Seahawks. And then moving on to our number 31 team, also staying put from last week, it's the Tennessee Titans. They just got boat raced against the Indianapolis Colts. And, it started early with that Cam Ward pick six where he just threw the check down late, kind of lobbed it out there too, and Kenny Moore took it back. And Brian Callahan, sometimes I get him and his dad mixed up, just gave up play calling duties. I really do think that it's going to be over sooner rather than later for Brian Callahan. I think that, Cam Ward has been, kind of staying afloat. I think this week was probably his worst performance of the year. And I still like the defense, but, against a humming Colts offense, it was just tough for them to really, keep them in the game. Jonathan Taylor, just was magnificent for the Colts. And, I think that Tennessee really needs to find the right coach moving forward, because I do think that Brian Callahan's probably going to be the first coach to be fired. But we'll see. You never know. So Titans continue to just look really, really bad, unfortunately. And then dropping down 4 spots here for our number 30 team, we have the New York Football Giants, who just announced literally 10 minutes ago that Jackson Dart is going to start for them in week 4, not week 2. And I think that's an interesting move. Obviously it's a desperation move for Dable and Shane to save their jobs because they went up to get this guy in the first round. I don't think that Jackson Dart was worth a first-round pick. I had a second-round grade on Jackson Dart, who was, I believe, my QB3 or 4. I think that Russ just was pitiful in week 3, but I think moving to Dart this early is not the right decision. If I were the Giants, and I guess that's because my job isn't on the line with Dable and Shane, so I think it would be different if I was in their shoes. But if I was the Giants, just as an organization in general, I wouldn't have started Dart till probably at least week 8 if the offense was just truly unwatchable, or they're just Russ is just not getting it done out there, or I would wait till they were eliminated from the playoffs. I actually probably would have went to Jameis in this situation if they were going to really move off of Russ, but it'll be interesting to see that. Russ was pitiful, and I actually don't put it all on Russ. I really think that the play calling in that game was really bad. They just couldn't get Malik Neighbors the football for whatever reason. I was screaming at him to just throw a hitch and let the guy make plays after the catch like we've seen him do. And it was just a really deep ball centric offense. And against Kansas City, I felt like they needed to really play ball control football, and they easily could have won that game had their offense just had any movement to the football at all. And the bright side of this is Cam Scatterbu looks really good, and their O-line was pretty good. On Sunday Night Football, I felt like Andrew Thomas was in there for part of it, and then he might have gotten hurt or something because Mbo was back in. But I felt like they were pretty good out there, and defensively, I still think they're underwhelming up front, but they did play a pretty good game against the Chiefs offense there on Sunday Night Football. Moving on to our number 29 team, dropping 2 spots, we have the New York Jets. falling to 0-3, I felt that Tyrod did some good things. They were able to run the football. They had the block kick to give them the lead late in that game, and then defense couldn't stop. I'm still waiting for that, elevation of the defense from Aaron Glenn. I still think it's going to take some time, but, I would like it to happen sooner rather than later for a defensive coach. We'll see if Justin Fields is back this week. They have, somewhat of a pivotal Monday Night Football game against the Miami Dolphins, who are getting like an extra long week to prepare. It's a battle of 0-3 teams, so that's their first opportunity to get the win. And I will say Garrett Wilson continues to look pretty good for the New York Jets there. Moving on to our number 2018, moving up 2 spots from last week, we have the Cleveland Browns, who had a very surprising victory over the Green Bay Packers. Like I said in the week 3 picks video, I said that they needed to make it a slugfest, low-scoring game. That's exactly what they did. They went down there, kicked the field goal, and then they got the turnover, from Jordan Love. They blocked the kick, made the game-winning kick of their own. So a really good win from Cleveland here. Their defense just continues to be really awesome. I'm not moving them up more spots because the offense is just still really, really bad. And Joe Flacco, despite them winning, I just don't really see the point in sticking with Flacco. Good to see Quinshon Judkins out there and make an impact for that team. 94 yards on the ground and a touchdown in his first career start. So it looks like that if he can just stay out of trouble, that would be, beneficial to them. But Myles Garrett was just unblockable in this game. They were double teaming him, triple teaming him. It just didn't matter. He was all over Jordan Love in this game. And, Cleveland, if they're going to be better than people expect this year, they're just going to have to play through that defense and keep games to this level of scoring. Moving on to my number 27 team, moving up 2 spots, it is the Miami Dolphins. And a lot of people are going to be maybe upset that Cleveland is below them, but I do think that Miami showed encouraging signs both offensively and defensively. I think Mike McDaniel was brilliant in Thursday Night Football. I think he gave them every chance to win that game possible. I think that they still have to get the ball in the hands of their weapons earlier, but they were able to find Weddle later in the game. They were able to get, Tyreek Hill consistent opportunities. Didn't always capitalize on them. I thought that Tua played, better than he has this season, but that's not really saying a lot. He threw a bad pick at the end of the game, to kind of seal it for Buffalo there. And I felt like HN was still their best weapon on offense, and I felt like defensively too. Miami played the best that they have, played in a long time. I felt like they gave them an opportunity to really come back into the game. So I think that that's something that they can build off of for next week. Moving on to my number 26 team, dropping 2 spots from last week, it is the New England Patriots, and fumbles are killers, man. Ramondre Stevenson fumbled twice. Drake May fumbled once, and Antonio Gibson fumbled once. And man, this was one of the more frustrating games that I've watched as a Patriots fan. You could clearly see they were the better team on the field against Pittsburgh. They just couldn't capitalize on their defense continually keeping them in that game, and then they kept shooting themselves in the foot. It was pretty brutal. Their first 2 picks, Will Campbell looked pretty rough in this game, and Trevion Henderson I continue to just question why they took him in the second round. Couldn't take, advantage of any of the opportunities that he had at the end of the game with, Stevenson and Gibson in the doghouse. And Pop Douglas on 4th down, just fall backwards and you got the first down, man. Situational awareness, you need to know it. I question why he's on the field over Kyle Williams at this point in time. Hunter Henry was awesome. Got to give him a lot of credit, but him being your number 1 option is not great. Defensively, they kept us in this game. I can't really say anything bad about the defense. They kept us in this game. Had a nice interception by Robert Spillane that Aaron Rodgers threw right to him. So, just got to be more consistent on offense and quit turning the ball over. Moving on to my number 25 team, moving up 3 spots from last week, it is the Carolina Panthers, who get a huge win at home over the Atlanta Falcons, winning 30-0, I believe, was the final score of that game. And we kind of saw this a little bit last year with the Panthers starting really slow and then building back up. So I think that just may be the case again this year. Bryce Young looked pretty good. Tet looks everything is advertised. Still wondering why the Patriots didn't take him 4th overall, but we move. And defensively, really stepped up this week. They kept the Atlanta run game in check. They had a couple big picks off of Michael Penix Jr., made him really uncomfortable back there. Panthers traveled to New England this week. It's a big game for both of those teams. We'll see if, which team can get to 2-2 and which team falls to 1-3 next week. But I do think that, if Carolina can continue to funnel the offense through Teterow and McMillan, I think that they're going to find some success here throughout the season. Moving on to my number 24 team, dropping 2 spots from last week. It is the Cincinnati Bengals, and I can't say that I'm not surprised that they lost this game. I think by the margin of victory is a little bit surprising, but I just felt like it was a bad matchup for Cincinnati this week. Jake Browning didn't look very good. The O-line got absolutely torched by, the Minnesota front. And Brian Flores really made it difficult for this team. I think they just need to get back to the drawing board offensively, defensively, special teams-wise to, make sure they keep the season afloat, for if or when Joe Burrow comes back, later in the season. Jake Browning was not good in this game. They continue to not be able to run the football. And defensively, I felt like they didn't play like horrible, but, getting lit up by Carson Wentz is not fantastic. I felt like Wentz had way too much time to throw back there and, was hitting open receivers left and right. I felt like, a lot of blown coverages there from Cincinnati, so they just have to get back to the drawing board. Moving on to my number 23 team, dropping 2 spots from last week, is the Las Vegas Raiders. And defensively, what are we doing against Marcus Mariota and, Washington? They let up a lot of big plays in this one. I felt like the Raiders were going to win this game handily, and that was the opposite of the fact. I felt like Geno played a pretty good game in this one. Trey Tucker had a career game. He's kind of holding off Dante Thornton for that deep threat role in this offense. So shout out to Trey Tucker. But, they continue to not be able to run the football like they should with Ashton Genty. And the pass protection was still a problem in this game. I think that needs to really be, fixed. I think Dylan Parham is struggling. DJ Glaze is struggling. I really think that the Raiders got to get that under control if they're going to, get back on the right foot. And, against a Chicago team that came off of a big win they have upcoming this week, that's going to be a tall task for them. Our biggest faller of the week is next up for our number 22 team. Dropping 8 spots is the Houston Texans, who fall to 0-3. Look, man, this offense is just not working. Stroud didn't have a great game again this week. No pass protection. They can't run the football. Nick Chubb just doesn't look like his old self at all. I really think that they should consider, a tandem of Dameon Pierce and Woody Marks. And they still can't get the ball to these dynamic rookies that I think would really insert some juice into this offense. Nico Collins was bottled up by Jacksonville this week as well. The defense is still playing good football. And, I think in this game that neither team wanted to win, but the Texans' defense, I think, was the best unit on the field. They just couldn't capitalize from, the stops that the defense got offensively. So I really think that it's gut check time against Tennessee at home for the Houston Texans this week. It's a battle of 0-3 teams, and they desperately need to win this game. If not, their season could be over. Week 4, which is, something that we didn't think would happen. I did pick the Texans to miss the playoffs, but I had them as an 8-9 team, really fighting for this division crown with Jacksonville, who I picked to win. Not Indianapolis, it was Jacksonville. But I didn't see them getting off to this slow of a start. I really think that they need to rely on their youth offensively in order to jumpstart this offense. Moving on to my number 21 team, moving up 2 spots this week, it is the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are coming off the victory against the Houston Texans. And honestly, for Jacksonville, not a very convincing win, but, the big play to Brian Thomas kind of at the end of the game, opened up the opportunity for them to, take the lead and, run away with this game. I think that T-Law is still really inconsistent in his play. I would like to see him kind of settle down a little bit more. Brian Thomas Jr. still looks in his head, but, the backfield of Tootin and Etienne Jr. looks really good for Jacksonville. That's kind of, driving this offense, and Jacksonville's defense has looked really good. Josh Hines-Allen had a great game for Jacksonville, which they really needed him to have in order to beat Houston this week. I think the key for Jacksonville is if Liam Cohen can get this offense really in the direction that, he wants them to play, I think that they're going to have a really good chance of fighting with Indianapolis for this division. But I do think that needs to be, figured out sooner than later. We kind of talked about the chemistry with Hunter and Thomas with T-Law, and they got Travis Hunter going a little bit more this week, but I'd like to see them continue to lean into those guys. They're dynamic playmakers, and they need the ball in their hands. Moving on to our number 20 team, dropping down a spot, it is the Dallas Cowboys. And in all honesty, man, this one was, a pick 'em going into it. I went with Dallas in this one. I felt like they had shown more. And honestly, the biggest concern for me is this defense is just woeful, man. Matt Eberflus, he had a quote before the game that he knew how to stop Chicago. He kind of knew, what concepts they run, what, where their weaknesses are and stuff. And he just got torched, man. Trayvon Diggs looks brutal out there, and then his replacement came in and got torched by Luther Burden on that touchdown. And I felt like, dropping him more, but I still think the offense looked pretty good. I mean, Dak threw 2 picks, but one of them was just off the hands of George Pickens. The other one was pretty bad, but I still think this offense can give them a chance to win football games, week in and week out. No CD for 2 to 4 weeks is tough, though, but I do think that Pickens will step up, and Ferguson's looked pretty good. And, Javonte, other than getting mugged by Tyreek Stevenson, I think he's looked, pretty good through the first 3 weeks of the season. And I like Brian Schottenheimer, offensively, I think has done a good job of, getting this Dallas team to play, at their level, even a little bit above it in, 2 of the 3 weeks, I think. I think just that defense is just maybe the worst in the league right now. Moving on to our number 19 team and moving up 6 spots, our highest riser of the week, and it is the Chicago Bears. First of all, Ben Johnson, shout out to you, man. Offensive masterclass, that was awesome. Getting all those pieces involved. Rome Odunze looks awesome. I mean, if there's a most improved award in the NFL, which there currently isn't, it would go to Rome Odunze, in my opinion. Caleb Williams, with the best game of his young career, I felt he was poised, he was accurate, he was timely, he was playing in structure. Just really good to see that from Caleb Williams, know that that's in there. Luther Burden had an awesome route, man. He slow played it on the play action and then took off, was wide open, was an awesome touchdown. One of my favorite plays of the week there. Really good route from him. And DJ Moore got involved in this game too. He caught a touchdown. I think, and defensively, Dennis Allen was in his bag. He made it tough on Dak this week. Even though he gave up a lot of yards, played that bend don't break defense. Legacy game from Tremaine Edmonds. He was awesome in this one for the Chicago Bears. And if they can continue to build on this, they have Vegas next week. It's going to be an interesting matchup between them. I think that they can start to, build a little momentum, maybe fight for a wild card spot here in a tough NFC, but we'll see if the Bears can continue that momentum. Moving on to my number 18 team, dropping a spot in the power rankings this week, it is the Atlanta Falcons. I really did want to drop them more, man. I wanted to drop them more, but honestly, I still think that they're just slightly a better team than Chicago, Dallas, Jacksonville. I think all these teams can be kind of flipped around a little bit, but this is the order that I landed on. Michael Penix Jr. was really brutal. I mean, the pick 6 to Chow Smith-Wade was awful. It was just basic cover 3. Lazy throw. Chow Smith-Wade picks it, houses it. They just couldn't get anything going on offense, and defensively they just couldn't, hold Carolina. They did for the first half, and then second half they just, kind of let the floodgates open. But this is one where you just kind of throw away the tape, start over next week against a good Washington Commanders team, and, try and build off of that one. But that's probably Penix's worst start to date in the NFL. I know he's only on start 6, 5? So, I do think that Atlanta you just got to go back to the drawing board this week. There's nothing much more to say with them. Moving on to my number 17 team, it is the Arizona Cardinals dropping a spot. You know, it just continues to baffles me that we just have the same conversation with the Cardinals every week. This time, offensively, they just couldn't get it done. And part of that was not being able to run the ball this week. The James Conner injury really sucks. I'm a huge James Conner guy, and that just sucks to see. But I do think that Trey Benson's ready to step up in this role and give Arizona what they need from a rushing perspective. I felt like Kyler played pretty well in this game. I think he was let down a couple times, especially by Marvin Harrison Jr., who had a couple of brutal drops. I mean, there was one wide open where he dropped it. I think Trey McBride had a good game for them offensively, and pass pro-wise, they were pretty good. And defensively, they were good. It's just, can they figure out a way to put it all together? It's a really pivotal game for them this week against a 2-1 Seattle Seahawks team at home on Thursday Night Football, short week. We're going to find out a lot about these two teams who, spoiler alert, ironically, I have Seattle at 16 this week. And I'm really excited for that matchup on Thursday Night Football. I think it's going to be a really, really good one for, these two teams. And I want to see Arizona come out there and really, kind of prove that they can play a 60-minute football game. So like I said, moving on to my number 16 team, moving up 4 spots, it is the Seattle Seahawks. Not really, they're really moving up from byproducts of teams moving down more so than their performance, but they did take care of, the Saints. They did really kind of show out on offense. Sam Darnold looked really good. Jackson Smith and Jigba looked good. And they were able to really run the football this week with Kenneth Walker. I think that's a really good selling point. I think they kept Sam Darnold clean. I don't think that he was sacked at all in this football game. So that's another thing to, really take away from this Seattle O-line that has really struggled. In the years past, I think that they're, starting to turn a corner there with the guys that they have there. So I think that's a good thing. And defensively, they just harassed, the Saints offense this week. So it's another building block for them. And like I said, big game for them coming up Thursday Night Football against Arizona. Love to see how that one pans out. And then moving on to my number 15 team, staying put, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think if you're a Steelers fan, and because I'm in Pennsylvania now, I work with a lot of them, talk to a few people at work. They really said that they didn't feel good about this one coming out. I think that Pittsburgh just could not move the ball in this game. They could at the end of the game when it really mattered. They kind of got help from a really questionable penalty, which there were a few in this game on both sides, but there were a couple of questionable PI calls on both sides with just non-catchable footballs, and I question if non-catchable is a thing anymore. But Pittsburgh, I think offensively they couldn't really move the ball in this game at all. They were able to get some sort of a running game going, which I think is a bright spot, but passing wise they couldn't really get it going. And defensively, they got the ball moved on them a ton. They just, the Patriots just turned the ball over at inopportune times and, kept Pittsburgh in this game. And then I will give them credit. When they needed a big drive, they got one from Aaron Rodgers. And then defensively, they were able to hold the Patriots on the final drive of the game due to Pop Douglas's incompetence. But that was a really good tackle by Brandon Eccles. So, if you're Pittsburgh, I think, another big game at this time in Dublin, Ireland against the Minnesota Vikings. We'll have to see how that one works out. But I do think that, they squeak out of here with a win. But I don't know if you feel really good about it if you're a Steelers fan. Moving on to my number 14 team. Moving up 4 spots, I have the Minnesota Vikings. Just a pure defensive masterclass from Brian Flores. Isaiah Rodgers with one of the best games I've ever seen from a defensive back. Pick 6, forced fumble recovery, and then I think he had another forced fumble. Like, he was just all over the place. The Vikings defense ate this week, man. And shout out Carson Wentz. I mean, 6th team in 6 years, looked really good in this start. Got the ball on time, was able to, be a stabling force for this offense. Got the ball to Justin Jefferson. Got the ball to T.J. Hawkinson, which we haven't seen through the first 2 weeks of the season. And Jordan Mason providing stability on the ground. He was awesome for Minnesota in this game. Really like what I saw from them. And I think if Carson Wentz can continue to just be a stabilizing force, he might be the starter the rest of the year for the Vikings. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but if they continue to win football games, go like 3-1 in this with this IR stretch of McCarthy, they might not go back to him, which might be a good thing for the Vikings, to have a stabilizing force there on offense and, be in play for a wild card spot, potentially the division here, which is a tough division in the NFC North. Moving on to my number 13 team, dropping a spot from last week is the Denver Broncos. And from this game, they played tough. It was a tough opponent in the Los Angeles Chargers, which we'll be getting to later in this Power Rankings video. Bo Nix missed, I think, like 4 or 5 throws that could have been game-changing and could have won Denver this game. He missed like 2 or 3 deep balls. He missed one early to Krul on a stick route. I just think that Nix really needs to just kind of settle down. I think he's a little bit antsy out there from time to time. I do like that they're able to run the football this year with J.K. Dobbins and Harvey providing a little bit of a change up there. Defensively, I think they played well in this game, and Nick Bonito continues to look really good out there. Zach Allen had some sacks. Jonathan Cooper got after the quarterback. I think Justin Herbert's just playing out of his mind right now, and that go-ahead touchdown that game-tying touchdown was just there's not really anything more you can do about that. I mean, Nick Bonito was in his face, weird arm angle from Herbert, and a savvy vet move from Keenan Allen to kind of like go up to, get the defender to go up and then, catch it low, and just couldn't capitalize on their opportunity to take the lead. Another brutal loss for Denver, but I think that this team is still a good football team. I think they just, have to kind of work through some kinks on the offense. And then coming in at number 12, moving up one spot, it is the Washington Commanders, who had a really impressive win. Marcus Mariota looked pretty good out there, except for that random jump fumble that he had. They were able to run the ball really well in this game with Rodriguez and McNichols and Krosky, Merritt, and Mariota mixing in there. So that was really good for them to see, and they were able to get the ball to Terry McLaurin in this game. I felt like they were really in sync, both offensively and defensively, and I was dead wrong about the Commanders team. I thought that they were going to lose this one, and they came out and they won this game. Big win for the Commanders, and they have a really important game against the Falcons this week. Hopefully you can get Jane Daniels back, but it's great to steal one with him not in the lineup. And I felt like this week was their most complete game of the season, so you like to see that. Hopefully they can build off of that next week for a pivotal matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. Moving on to my number 11 team, dropping one spot this week is the San Francisco 49ers, who, despite winning, this is more so, I think, from the Nick Bosa injury. I think that's a really big loss for them. Tore his ACL, will be done for the season. That's brutal for them. I also think that, offensively, I'd still like to see them get the run game going a little bit more. They haven't been able to do that. Mac Jones played pretty well in this game, though, I will say. Ricky Pearsall, probably had his best game of the pro. He was really awesome. And they got some production from other guys on this team. Defensively, Fred Warner's just an absolute animal. He's going to have to continue to step up with Nick Bosa, going down for the season. And I wonder who's going to step up on that pass rush for them. It's going to be really interesting to see, can they get production from Mykel Williams and some of these other guys. The injury bug just continues to hit San Francisco at the worst of times. Hopefully they can get Brock Purdy back next week. That would be a big boost for them. But Mac Jones going 2-0 for them really helps. And San Francisco sitting at 3-0 here is huge for this football team. Moving on to my number 10 team, moving up one spot from last week, I have the Indianapolis Colts, who continue to be an absolute force. Offensively, Daniel Jones continuing to play point guard, looking really good. Michael Pittman looks great. Josh Downs looks great. Tyler Warren wasn't as big of a factor in this game because Jonathan Taylor went absolutely nuts. He might be the leader for Offensive Player of the Year right now. Jonathan Taylor looks really good. He looks back to that 2021 season where he absolutely dominated for Indianapolis in the season where they had Carson Wentz as a starter. I remember going to, the game in Indianapolis against the Patriots and Jonathan Taylor, taking that to the house to seal the game for them. That's the guy that's back for Indianapolis, which is huge for them. And defensively, they really made it tough on Cam Ward this week, got a couple of picks off of him. The pass rush showed up this week, from Kwity Paye, which I think was a big surprise. DeForest Buckner had a really good game. So I think that Indianapolis is continuing to be one of the biggest surprises, to some people maybe. I felt like they were going to be, like I said, better than a lot of people thought, but I never thought they would start the year 3-0. So Shane Steichen as well, continuing to, be a really, really good coach. Favorite for Coach of the Year right now, in my opinion. And Indianapolis continues to look really good. Moving on to my number 9 team. Staying put here, I have the Kansas City Chiefs, who come away with their first victory of the season, albeit against the New York Giants on the road. But, the Kansas City Chiefs, they did some good things here. I think they got a little bit of a run game going between Pacheco and Hunt. They were able to kind of be a more efficient group this week, which I think really helped. Tyquan Thornton continues to look really good for this team. Wish I could have had that, on the New England Patriots, but it is what it is. And I think Mahomes playing really well. I think that, despite, kind of all the narratives of Chiefs not having as an explosive of an offense as in years past, I think he's playing really well. And, the O-line held up this week against a really good Giants front four. And defensively, I think that they were able to get, the effort that they needed. Got a couple of picks off of Russ, who, kind of helped them out defensively. I still think they need to, kind of work some things out there. But, Kansas City, big game this week against Baltimore at home. I think that's going to be an interesting game for them. We'll see if they can pull that one out after Baltimore lost to Detroit on Monday Night Football. Moving on to my number 8 team, staying put, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here. I think that, another game-winning drive from Baker Mayfield. Where have we seen that before? Dude is just so clutch in crunch time, man. Missing Mike Evans for a couple weeks is going to be tough, though, on this team, so they're really going to need Emeka Egbuka to step up. They're going to need Cade Otton to step up, Bucky Irving, Rashad White, all those guys. And I think, this game really shouldn't have been as close as it was. The blocked field goal kind of changed, the tide of this game a little bit. But, Tampa has a big game coming up against Philadelphia. And we're going to really see how good this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team is. Philly got a big win over the Rams. And, Tampa Bay starting out 3-0. It's going to be a big one. I don't think they're going to get Godwin back. If they could get Tristan Wirfs back, that would be huge for this team, who's down 3 offensive linemen right now. Which kind of worries me against that Philly, front four. But we'll see how Tampa Bay deals with that next week. I do think that the defense struggled a little bit more than I would have thought against, the New York Jets. But I think that they'll be able to correct that with Todd Bowles next week. Moving on to my number 7 team, dropping 2 spots. Not necessarily because of how they played, just because of other teams. We have the Los Angeles Rams. In all honesty, I still really like the Rams, and they should have covered this game. That was a brutal no cover from the Rams there, but they just kind of blew this one. They kind of took their foot off the gas a little bit, but Kyren Williams got going in this game. I think that was really, really good to see for him. I felt like Stafford played an okay game. He could have been better. He did really put them in position to win that game. The field goal was just blocked, unfortunately. And I think defensively, they were kind of all over Jalen Hurts in the first half, and then the second half kind of came and Philly adjusted, and they were able to get a downfield passing game going, and get themselves back in this game. But I think that the Rams did a really good job of stopping Saquon. I felt like that was the key for them to win this game, and for a while there it looked like they were. I think they're going to get back to the drawing board, and I believe they have a tougher opponent this week as well. Week 4, they have the Colts, so they have the 3-0 Colts coming to town. Another tough game for them. Going to be excited to watch that one for sure. We'll see how they look in that one. Moving on to my number 6 team, dropping 2 spots. It is the Green Bay Packers, and I think that they just really tried to play this game, not to lose. That's really what I take away from this game. They try to just win the game with the defense, not do anything too fancy on offense, not turn the ball over, and it backfired on them. And the Packers, that's what you get for playing not to lose. Whenever you play not to lose, you're going to lose a football game. And I think that Matt LaFleur will get this team back to where it needs to be. I think Jordan Love was pretty inconsistent in this game, but I think that will change next week. And the Packers' defense was really good. I mean, other than the field goal drives, the first one and the one at the end of the game, The defensively, they were really good in this game again. I felt like other than Quinshon Judkins, nobody really beat them. So I think that you just kind of chalk this one up to, LaFleur be like, hey, I played not to lose instead of to win, and, bit us in the ass. Moving on to number 5, our number 5 team dropping 3 spots. We have the Baltimore Ravens, and speaking of playing not to lose, Baltimore, classic. John Harbaugh punting that football is really inexcusable, honestly. They were really lucky, in my opinion, to get the ball back. I feel like they kind of let David Montgomery score in order to do that, but I just can't even I can't even fathom that decision, man. Put the ball in Lamar's hands and let him go to work. Derrick Henry with another brutal fumble this week for the Ravens. That just, he had 3 fumbles combined in 2023 and 2024 and 484 touches. And he has 3 fumbles here in 2025 and 48 touches. So just brutal there from Derrick Henry. You can't have that happen. Felt like Lamar was not necessarily good or bad. He was just kind of in between. They did a really good job of bottling him up. Detroit did. But I felt like Lamar made some big-time plays in this game to kind of keep them going, but they just felt out of sync offensively, and this defense continues to just allow big play after big play. They really got to get that corrected. I think that, this week it was the rushing game that really, kind of broke them through. David Montgomery had a couple huge runs for Detroit in this game. So until Baltimore gets their defense together, they're, going to continue to just allow, teams to stay in games with them, which I think is what's hurting them. Moving on to my number 4 team, dropping a spot, I have the Buffalo Bills. Honestly, I think it's just from what the 2 teams directly above them did more so than them. I did think that they should have beat Miami by more points, honestly, but, they still did what they, do. Offensively against Miami, they looked pretty good. They had a couple drives stalled, but James Cook continues to look really good. Josh Allen was great. They got Keon Coleman involved. They got Khalil Shakir involved. Dalton Kincaid looks more like the rookie year Dalton Kincaid than last year. He was a little bit banged up. Offensive line looks really good. I don't think Miami got any pressure on Josh Allen at all in this game. And Josh used his legs when he needed to, not all the time. Defensively, I still have concerns with Buffalo. If you look at the graphic up here, they're still 32nd in run defense, and they kind of didn't really stop Devon Achane at all, so that concerns me with Buffalo. But big pick by Terrell Bernard to kind of seal that game, and hopefully Buffalo continues to kind of build on that. No Ed Oliver again in this game, so he'll kind of add to the pass rush next week. So we'll see how the Bills attack the Saints next week at home. Moving on to my number 3 team, moving up 3 spots, it is the Los Angeles Chargers, and I'm here for it, man. I'm here for it. Justin Herbert, MVP through 3 weeks. He just looks phenomenal. He was always a top 5 quarterback in the league, but I think that he is knocking on that door of top 3. I don't think he's quite there yet, but I do think that there's a legit argument for him to be the 4th best quarterback in the league right now. He's playing really, really well. They finally got Omarion Hampton going a little bit in this game, which was really nice to see. Keenan Allen still looks great. How was he not signed by somebody else earlier? And maybe it was just him doing the whole I'm not doing the training camp thing, which I can respect, but Keenan Allen looks great, man. And Quentin Johnston, I can't say it enough. The redemption arc, I'm just so here for. Defensively, they looked a little shaky in this game early, and then they kind of settled in. They got stops when they needed to. Were kind of bailed out by Bo Nix missing a couple of throws, but they were able to keep that pass game in check. They were able to get after Bo Nix without Khalil Mack, so I think that's a good sign for them. They got a rookie Jackson Dart next week on the road. They got to go cross country, so we'll see how that one turns out. Maybe at that game, we'll see. So I think that that's a big win for the Chargers, big divisional win to move to 3-0, and they've got an 0-3 Giants team next week. Could be looking at 4-0 for the Chargers, which is really, really big for them. Moving on to my number 2 team, moving up 5 spots with a super impressive win was the Detroit Lions. this was kind of their, like, hey, don't forget about us game. You know, they were pulling out trick after trick offensively. That fourth down play where they handed it to Amon-Ra and then he, flipped it behind to Gibbs for the touchdown was awesome. You know, they don't need Ben Johnson to come up with these crazy, ridiculous offensive plays. And, they were really able to pound the rock in this game with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Sonic and Knuckles had a hell of a game. Amon-Ra was doing Amon-Ra things in this game. Sam Laporta was involved in the offense. And Goff was just steady Eddie, as he usually is. Didn't turn the ball over and really, kept this offense, in a good rhythm. And then defensively, they really made it tough on Lamar in this game. I was really impressed with that. They got after Lamar. I think they had like 7 sacks and they had like 30 pressures as a unit, which is really awesome to see. Jack Campbell had a really good game in this one. Alex Anzalone, who I have like never been a big fan of, had like the best game I've ever seen him play in his career. Shout out to him. He was really awesome in this game in both coverage and run defense. And, they kept Derrick Henry in check as well. Huge forced fumble by Aiden Hutchinson. Hustle plays. He's just still better than ever, coming back off that injury. And Detroit looks to be a force in this league. But staying put at my number 1 team is Philadelphia. I think this was a huge win for this team. Huge come from behind win against the Rams, who I did pick to win that game. I felt like Jalen Hurts, got a little bit more comfortable in the passing game. They got A.J. Brown involved. They got Devontae Smith involved. They got Dallas Goedert involved. The run game didn't work very well this week. They were able to kind of reinvent themselves a little bit offensively this week, get the downfield passing game going. That's very encouraging. And the defense stepped up big time in the second half, able to stop Matthew Stafford in that offense. And huge block kick by Jordan Davis at the end of the game to really, seal that one, take it for the touchdown. Broke my heart that the Rams didn't cover that one. But I do think that, again, big win for them against the Rams. Going to see a lot, in this Philly team against Tampa on the road this week. Going to be another tough one for them, but I very, very much look forward to seeing it. So with that will conclude my Week 4 power rankings. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. And stay tuned for my Week 4 picks coming up on Thursday. Those will be out. And I will get a quiz out. I had to work on Friday. I apologize. There will be one out this week. But as always, guys, thanks for watching. Have a great day and peace.